to this next session. This next session will be entirely online. We have an online panel. Our moderator is actually a long-term friend and supporter of IAFOR. He couldn't make it this time to the conference. He always makes it, so it would have been a hybrid panel, but unfortunately, we do this completely online this time. Can I ask the moderator, the panelists to turn on the cameras? Thank you. Okay, so who you see on the screen is Dr. Sean McMinn. He is the director of the Center of Education Innovation at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. He previously served as associate professor and director of the English Language Center at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University and held various academic roles at that university, including associate professor of language education and co-academic director of the Masters in International Language Education program. As an early adopter of educational technologies, he has led initiatives in AI, in education, blended learning, and fully online teaching modes. He currently serves on several international committees, including the AI in Education International Panel, the Digital Education Council, the Cyber Physical Learning Alliance, and the EdTech Asia Organizing Committee. He is also one of the organizing members of the committee of this conference. So he will be the moderator of this presentation, which is navigating the hype and reality of generative AI in higher education, opportunities, challenges, and emerging trends. I will let Dr. Sean McMinn introduce the rest of the panelists. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here virtually. I really conference and I really enjoyed meeting everyone in Tokyo last year. I recognize the room. So I'd like to hear at the moment, but I believe it's around midnight in Mexico, so they may be a little behind time, but that's okay. I'm really excited to bring together these panelists to talk about the impact of AI in higher education. And what I see is a growing need for international, interinstitutional, or even regional collaboration. And indeed, we're starting to see the rise of various universities starting to collaborate with each other through various groups. And what I've done is I've invited key members of a few of these groups that are actually working on areas within digital education and also with a focus on AI and education. With me today, right now, we have Kenneth, who is from the Singapore University of Technology and Design. He is the director of the Office of Digital Learning and leads the Cyber Physical Learning Alliance, which is a key alliance that looks at issues ranging from technology within a cyber physical learning environment to technology pedagogy and also the ethics of cyber physical learning. In fact, this is a true test of cyber physical learning right now, this panel. And also with me is Danny, who is the president of the Digital Education Council. He's also based in Singapore, although the DEC is a global council with, gosh, I can't remember, Danny, I think it's well over 40 institutions involved in the council. And they have various working groups that look after a range of topics related to digital education, from skills, future of skills, to online learning, right down to artificial intelligence. And then, of course, myself, I'm from the Hong Kong University. I'm the of Science and Technology. I'm the director for the Center for Education Innovation, and I'm involved with both of these organizations. I'd like to actually jump right into the conversation. So I think there's a lot of interesting topics that we can discuss, and I'm going to begin by asking both Danny and Kenneth, why do we have the need for these collaborations, and what can they bring? So, how can initiatives like the Cyber Physical Learning Alliance or the Digital Education Council help institutions develop informed and context-sensitive AI strategies? Because it may differ regionally, and every institution is very different. So, maybe I'll open it up to Danny first, and then we'll move to Kenneth.
Sure. Thanks very much, Sean, and thanks to everyone for inviting me today. So we've got I guess one of the reasons why we founded the council is because there was this lack of really practical and outcome focused approaches to some of these really big issues. So we looked particularly at things like artificial intelligence and said, well, some of the things that we're doing in terms of analyzing information in some terms of making it very practical, but also having a very global view, was very interesting to people. And so we're now an alliance of nearly 70, actually nearly 70 universities from around the world. And that's growing pretty much every week. And the reason why um, the need for this came up was because things like artificial intelligence, sustainability, the future of work and skills were really urgent things that need to be dealt with at a very, very practical level. And of course, there are regional and local nuances to all of these sorts of things. But for the first time, these mega trends were converging on a global level, and needed to be dealt with, even if they need to be dealt with in a different way. So what we've tried to do is really put a bit of a lens over the top of this and say, well, how did we get here? What brought us to this moment? What's a structured way of looking at these things? So we can say, well, this is applicable at a global level, this is applicable at a regional level, and this is applicable to us. But we provide the lens in which to do that. And then say, well, okay, well, what tools and resources can we use to take our next steps? So that's really what we felt the need was. And certainly, I mean, the growth and trajectory probably bears that out.
Thanks, Danny. I'm gonna follow up with something that you said in a moment, but I just like to introduce to the audience Hector, who just arrived. Hello, Hector. Hector is the director of the Living Lab and Data Hub at the Institute for the Future of Education at the Technological de Monterrey in Mexico. Tech is also a member of both the CPLA and the DEC. So you're a kind of a bridge between two of these organizations in a sense. So I'll come back to Hector, where I'm just asking the audience members about the need for these global collaborations. But I want to come back to something that Danny mentioned first. I know that the DEC just held its very first summit uh, in Singapore with these, well, it's 70 plus. That's right. It is quite a large number of institutions. And in terms of AI, what were some of the things that emerged out of this meeting that you saw that may be similar and differ across the institutions regionally in terms of artificial intelligence and the readiness of universities?
No, it's a good question. I think so. Some of the themes that we saw was that I think everybody is past the point where we can't ignore it and we can't stop it, and nor is stopping it a good thing to attempt to do. So I think by and large, that's a big shift that we've seen over the last 12 months, is that, there was a little bit of we'll take a wait and see approach, or we'll try and prevent it and say, well, it's not going to happen in our institution. We'll go back to paper and pen examinations. I think most people are over that as a challenge. What we're starting to see, though, is the concern not just about how students use it, how we're going to assess them, but now those concerns beginning to evolve about what do we do as an institution, what do we maintain at a central level, what do we devolve to the school level or to faculty in terms of decision making, in terms of structures in which everybody can operate, and that varies quite dramatically, actually. And recently we actually did an executive briefing about the uses of artificial intelligence, the actual uses. Like we did as a research project to say, well, what are universities actually doing? And the variation was there for everyone to see. The number of approaches and the variety of approaches is still very, very broad. So there's no consensus on a regional level, on an institution type level. There's no consensus at all.
Yeah, very interesting. Kenneth, from Singapore's point of view, and from the point of view of Cyber Physical Learning Alliance, how can initiatives like this help in the context of AI strategies?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Yeah, I guess maybe I just start off with why the Alliance was started first. Because when we started the Alliance, there was a program at SUTD where we are developing solutions, technological and pedagogical, for the future of education. So we call this Campus X. So we then started sharing with our fellow peers, like UST, TEC, and so forth, even with our Singapore institutions. What does it mean? How can we improve learning? How can we maximize the learning capacities of each and every learner? That eventually, their human potential in terms of course, learning outcomes, academic, but also the social, the work aspects as well, the post education aspects. So we came out with this portfolio of trials, tools that we're developing. And I think through sharing of this with the other institutions in the Alliance, the Cyber Physical Learning Alliance, CPLA, I think all of us found that, we are facing the common challenge of how can we harness, for example, new tools like AI, and maybe even existing some of the tools like immersive AR, VR, how can we better harness it? How can we further develop it, to improve our learning outcomes? So that, through this sharing of our problem statements, sharing of our common challenges, that's why we felt that it's good for us to come together because, each of us have our own strengths. For example, SUTD, we could be more familiar with technology, with design, but, in terms of other areas like learning analytics, pedagogy at UST, learning analytics at TEC. And that's where we felt that by working together, we can come up with more comprehensive, more robust, better solutions. So in a nutshell, we share the common problem statements. I think we share the vision of cyber physical learning. And we also realize the importance of working together, sharing our respective knowledge in order to come up with better solutions for our students, at all our institutions. So that was I guess, the glue, that helped us to come together, and of course, why we come together to work together. And I think AI is very important. Like Danny was saying, we can't run away from it right now. It's really widely recognized that these are very important tools that industry are using. And that's why I think even among the Alliance, we also have projects, trials that we do jointly. We have joint development, joint trials in order to test out some of these solutions. And, in some of these solutions, AI is definitely there. Of course, generative AI is also another solution. Large language models specifically is also another solution that we are working on as well. So that is overall how we want to use it for. But of course, it will depend on the various flavors of it. Actually depends more on the curriculum of the various institutions on what they want to teach and how they teach it as well. And that is the tricky part because a tool will have to suit, the contents of each and every institution and the pedagogical style of each and every institution. So these are some of the trials that we're doing in order to see how some of the tools we are developing under the Alliance can be applicable to everyone as well.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks.
Sean.
No, thank you. I think it's really important what you mentioned about how each institution can bring a different expertise or experience or insight to these type of collaborations, whether it be a pedagogical insight or a technical insight or an understanding of learning analytics. In fact, Hector, I want to bring this question to you. Um, uh, Something about institutional contexts, right? And how universities can avoid a one-size-fits-all AI solution. And how do you tailor your strategies to this? So I know Technological de Monterrey has been doing quite a lot. You know, a very large university. How do you avoid a one-size-fits-all solution to this?
Sure, thank you, Sean. Good to talk to you. Well, in principle, you need to know your institution and the framework you have for in introducing these technologies. Okay. Depending on the institution, you will have some channels that you can use for reaching the teachers. For instance, how you introduce these technologies and invite them to participate. In Tec de Monterrey, we pioneered the use of ChatGPT in the beginning of 2022. And that with the a staff helping professors to prepare the classes using the technologies for using it in the class. So it was in somehow control. It's not on with all the professors, but we selected a group of them by invitation, and some of them were volunteers, and they started to do things, right? And based on that pilots, we could learn how it would be used and which were the risks. There was an assessment of that. And we knew that how to establish, we learned how to establish guidelines for responsible use of AI. That in principle is the thing that most worries all the universities right now. Even the professor is not sure that if they are using ChatGPT, they are using it in the right way. So defining clear guidelines is one step, and knowing how to communicate it to the teachers and students was another important aspect. You already have some elements implemented, for instance, regulations with your students, some mechanisms for penalize if this is a misuse of some resource. Now it's ChatGPT, but years ago was Wikipedia, right? But we were afraid to use. We need to tell the students you can use it, but you can use it this way. And when you use, in particular, generative AI, you must to declare you are using it, right? And how you are using it. Otherwise, it might be considered an irresponsible use, and you should have channels for or ways of penalizing this misuse of the technology. So these are the elements that universities might consider, and based on that, on what they have already implemented, build guidelines, and based on that, facilitate trustworthy use of these technologies.
Hey, Hector, you say a couple of things that I think are really important for us to consider. I mean, guidelines are very important. Transparency and communication is extremely important now more than ever. And I believe maybe Danny, I'll allude to you on this one. Research and surveys and findings are starting to show that students are not fully understanding how to use generative AI well. But there's also the danger that universities aren't communicating well enough as well. So there's this issue that guidelines aren't in place, or they may not be flexible enough to adhere to these differences and different levels of understanding of generative AI and how it can work. But also, it's not clear on what the policy is for academic integrity, for example, which needs to be very clear. And it's an assessment design. And sometimes it's not even clear who the stakeholders are. And the universities need to engage with the faculty, students, and administrative staff in that sense. So Danny, maybe if you can follow up, because I know DEC has had some findings in this area.
Yeah, so we recently conducted the Global AI Student Survey. So this was, and this is available, short plug, this is available from the website if you want to download it at digitaleducationcouncil.com. And we surveyed around 4,000 students across 16 countries and said, well, what are their perceptions about the use of AI? And it was actually really interesting. And we've had some follow-up surveys from some of our members who've come back to us and said, super consistent. This is consistent across undergraduate, postgraduate, doesn't matter the domain, doesn't matter the country, doesn't matter the language in which they're doing this. So we see this enormous amounts of consistency. First of all, students are saying, we don't know what first of all, 86% of students are using AI regularly in their higher education work. That we know from the survey. We also know that about 75% of students say, well, we're concerned that we don't understand enough and don't feel prepared for a workforce that uses artificial intelligence. And one of the really big findings from the survey is that, well, there's two really big findings. One of them is that whatever policies and rules are available from our institution, we either don't know about them or they're not comprehensive enough. And so we have this enormous lack. If you add together the people who don't know about the availability of policies and the ones who say that the policies are not comprehensive enough, the vast majority of students, well over 75% of students, are saying we don't know. We call them the lost in that particular thing. So they're lost, they feel lost. And then they say, well, what do we want to do about this? So over 75% of students say we wish as students we had more training about the use of AI, and more importantly, we wish you had more training on the use of AI. So they want to be able to have conversations, intelligent conversations with faculty, with administration, with leadership inside universities to say, we're using this, right? How can we use it? What's the right way to use it? Do we use it, as Hector says, with disclosure? Do we use it under certain circumstances? Are there particular tools we're allowed to use or not allowed to use? If you ban artificial intelligence at your institution, does that mean I can't use Grammarly? English is not my first language. What do I do? So these are the sorts of conversations and concerns that students have in their mind, and this was borne out in the Global AI Student Survey. What was really interesting for me in particular is that when you see these sorts of sentiment surveys around the world in any domain, if you have a high proportion of people saying, we wish we had more training, you would think that usage is exceptionally low. But we have very high demand for training and utilization is exceptionally high. So students are using it, whether you like it or not. They're they're doing it in their own way, whether you like it or not. So there's a real opportunity here. You asked me the question about communication. How do we communicate this? There's a number of things. So we bring all this together in something that we call the AI governance framework. And we published this earlier this year. The AI governance framework is already being used by universities around the world because it's very practical. What do we do today? We already make rules and policies. So how do we create structures in a way that doesn't build a whole new bureaucracy? How do we do it in a way that we involve the right people, that we have the right supervisory processes, that we manage risk, but at the same time evolve our teaching and learning processes so that we're capturing the future and we're using some really great AI tools to enhance the learning experience, to make the learning experience look much more like the other sorts of things that students who typically skew young typically do in their day-to-day stuff. Then once we've put this process into place, this is the foundation on which your communication lives, because it's not just good enough anymore to write a policy and publish it on your intranet. I have a news flash. students don't read your intranet. So we have an opportunity here to have a proper thoughtful process and build a proper communication strategy, just not just internally inside our walls, but also externally with our regulators, with our legislators, with our employers, with our parents, with our prospective students, because we need to bring a lot of people along for the ride. We're actually tomorrow, we're doing a briefing specifically on this topic of communication around AI because it is such an enormously hot topic. So I'll be very, very interested to hear what our members have to say about the work we've done in that area. But it is a big and very evolving area.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Danny. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, our university has recently adopted a policy that we must communicate all AI policies on the course syllabi or course syllabus, right? And through the learning management system. Now, the faculty have the flexibility to determine their own course level policy, but the only university-wide policy is it must be communicated in the course syllabus and through the learning management system. Otherwise, as you said, students may not be aware of the policies and how it's relevant to their course. Kenneth, your SUTD's experience in adopting generative AI. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So actually, we also look at it, once GenAI came onto the scene. So initially, I guess, like Sean and Danny has mentioned, we need to have some general policy communiques to give the broad guidelines. Basically, the principle at SUTD is that we have to harness these tools to improve learning and teaching. Of course, it can be in areas of teaching, learning, and assessment. But we need to come up with also flexibility. So the first thing we work together, and this involves the users. So we did a survey of with some of the faculty and some of the students to get their initial views on all these generative AI tools. For example, what do they see good for, and what are some of the potential downsides? So based on this survey, then we have a rough sense, of okay, what are the areas that the students were looking out for, and I think the good thing is about 80% of the students found that generative AI tools, were useful. So I think that was more or less encouraging because we also wanted our students to be conversant in AI tools. So we published certain broad communiques. We also involved students and faculty in formulating some of these communiques. And then the next thing is, of course, we also did certain outreach to promote the use of these generative AI tools. So that's where we do it at some of the pedagogical training sessions. Then the other thing is we did is also, we have to make sure that the students are also comfortable, that they are not being wrongfully penalized because there's some of these AI tools that are very sophisticated. So how can we avoid students, who actually did all the writing up themselves, writing essays, and yet, it might be mistaken for, using some of these AI tools. So at SUTD, we also felt that, okay, some of these AI, detection tools, I think some of the providers have some of these modules, and we decided not to use them because there was a high error rate. So we felt that it's safer that, in terms of the process of academic integrity, we can be stressful for the students, to not to use such tools which can give false positives. So we reassure the students that not to worry, and we also communicate clearly to the faculty on how they could use these tools. And another aspect of this is also we also addressed very important is the leak of confidential information because when students take part in research projects, they could inadvertently some of these research questions into the general ChatGPT, which is then accessible to everybody. So we also have to come up with certain cybersecurity training, not just for the faculty, but also it's for everybody, the faculty, the staff, the researchers, and students to go through some of these confidentiality training so that they are also aware what are the risks of all these AI tools. So over a period of, I think, right now, almost 1 and 2 years, we came out with a series of materials, trainings, sharings, and also online engagements with students, surveys, in order to uh, create the awareness that all these AI tools are very important. And specifically for the teaching staff, we also map out the use, or rather the meaning of AI literacy. Because all these, in terms of knowledge, is this word AI literacy. So we also felt that we also need to understand and define it better. So we came out with a 3-level classification. I think it's also very similar to what is being applied at UST, the 3 levels. Basically, level 1 is no coding use of AI. Number 2 is, of course, the use of AI tools with some API coding, interface programming coding. And the third is, of course, coming up with new models, training on new models. So we did a survey across all our faculty pillars, we call them IAFOR, and in order to see for what faculties, what discipline, what is the extent of level 1, level 2, and level 3. And this gave us a clear understanding of the adoption of AI tools in teaching and learning. Because certain disciplines, for example, like computer science, computer programming, that's where you expect more level 2 and maybe some level 3. And for postgraduate courses, maybe even more level 3 kind of things. So this gave us a good sense of way to see how SUTD is adopting these AI tools. But in general, I think the level 1, no coding use of AI, I think that is the basic requirement, the fundamental requirement. All our students should be able to use generative AI tools. Of course, the challenge is in the transition phase because now we have students who are graduating in, let's say, 1 year's time, right? So for like last year, they already graduated this year. So for these transitionary batches, it was a bit more tricky. How can we actually help to quickly improve their AI literacy before they graduate? So there were some of these challenges we had to address because of the graduating cohort, depending on the timeline when they graduate.
That's
So these
actually a
are some of
really
the-
So that's actually a really interesting point. I mean, we are kind of in a transitional period right now where it is such a new and hot topic, let's say. I mean, a few years down the road, I would suspect that a lot of our first year students will be a lot more AI literate coming into university. So there's a bit of a different context now than there will be in a few years down the road. And I think it's very interesting what you guys are doing. I mean, it's very comprehensive. Setting up communities of practice, sharing, and that's a very important factor, and also training, professional development for faculty. I know our institution, and I know we're not the only one, we've made it mandatory for our faculty to take online self-paced courses within 1 year's time, so they're all equipped with knowledge of artificial intelligence, mainly because there are some faculty who say, well, I'm in humanities, AI has nothing to do with me. Therefore, why do I have to learn about it? But even though their intentions and they do care about teaching, it is a bit of a naive view because artificial intelligence is having an impact across disciplines. And it's really important for us to be aware of that. I want to move now. So we've been talking at the institutional level. Let's bring it down to the teacher level now. And one of the things, and Hector, I'll move over to you. Let's talk about cyber-physical learning. I know one of your interests is learning analytics. And from a teacher's level, what potential does AI have in cyber-physical learning environments to help inform teachers as they're teaching?
Sure. Well, in particular, we have at Tec de Monterrey one project called Experiential Classroom that will be a learning lab where we will be able to capture information from our students and teachers, physiological information, neurological information, using wearable devices, the portable wearable devices that we could use for experimentation, for getting data in different situations. whereas we are using some new technology or trying a new pedagogy or making even the use of a maker space in the classroom is something that we are now incorporating in the classroom. And collect data and observe how the students are behaving during the class. Okay. In principle, the teacher may think that one strategy is the best one, and when you contrast with the actual what actually is happening, is something different. And probably the students may say something when they are asked about how they like the lecture or the presentation of a case study. But when you contrast with this information, you could get surprised, right? And in particular, using this data has helped us to identify, for instance, levels of concentration in students. Is something that we have now models, machine learning models that can tell us if a student in real time is focused or not, concentrated or not during the class. So that kind of information can help the teacher to know whether it is actually achieving the goal with the students using the technology he has, the moment in which all the students are. It's not the same teaching in the morning that in the afternoon, or a class that lasts 3 hours. It's not the same the first hour that the last hour. So you need to learn to use the tools and the time properly. And if you could get data, actual data to your students, that could help you to improve your strategies in the classroom. So that's the kind of information you could collect. But it's not the only one. You could also start to analyzing the participation of the students. And now that when you have participation online, you are able to collect the data, get the transcripts of the conversation, and based on that also make some interesting things like analyzing how the discussion going during an exercise, during the use of a simulator, for instance. We have an interesting experiment in that, and not only counting how much time is one person speaking to other, but also knowing what they are talking about will influence in the outcome of the exercise. So all that information, analyzing that information, will give you good strategies for applying during the courses.
Thanks, Hector. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, increasingly, there's a lot of available data in that sense, and I'll come back to that later about the ethics of managing this data. But I want to jump to the other topic that we were going to talk about, and that's cognitive offloading first. And I'm going to open this up to all three of you. So whoever would like to answer, please speak up. But I think one of the things, and would be a concern of a lot of teachers in this room, is some people fear that in the age of AI, it's going to reduce our students' critical thinking, and they'll be offloading their thinking to the machine. And there's some doom and gloom around this area, and then there are others who are saying, no, it's not that bad. So I just want to hear from the three of you, is this a concern, cognitive offloading, and what specific strategies can educators use to address this issue in an AI-driven learning environment?
I might jump in just quickly and talk about some of the stuff that we've sort of looked at, and I might actually bring this back to something that Hector said as well, because it's very interesting. This, if we take a step back, and we always try and take that 40,000 foot view and say, you know, why are we here? The challenges to the way people think about teaching and learning happens every time there is a new technology or new technique that has come along. And this is not new. So this is back to people learning to read and write en masse, books being published, as a result of the Gutenberg press, access to the internet, personal computers that people could own in their own homes, and then things like Wikipedia. So each time there's these sorts of step changes, people are concerned that it's not. If I think back to my own personal journey through this, I remember as a kid a very long time ago that I used to remember everybody's telephone numbers. I don't remember anyone's telephone number anymore. How important is it? I don't know. But what we try and do as a species what we try and do is always use each of these technological stepping points to improve the productivity of what we do, improve the quality of life, improve our longevity, improve the output versus the amount of effort that we put into it. This is another one of those where we're right to have discussions about this concept that we call cognitive offloading, but I think we ought to have intelligent conversations about it and say, well, what rather than what can we do about it or how do we prevent it, what do we do next? We have to acknowledge that the step change is happening, and we're in a limited position to be able to drive societal norms. So we have to be aware and cognizant of these shifts, of the shift in human behavior, and say, how do we adjust and adapt as a society, as an industry? I go back to something that Hector said, and I think at Tech they're well ahead of the curve in terms of some of this stuff. The ability for us to now, in a cyber physical way, apply a data layer to physical teaching and learning has been absent. We've been trying to do it for years. Again, I go back to when I was a kid, we used to have the assessor come in from the state government, would sit at the back of the class and they're evaluating our teacher. How effective are they in their teaching processes and whatever they did, once a year, you'd end up with somebody in the back of a classroom taking notes on a pad. It was a way of trying to apply data to something that was happening in the physical world. We're now able to do this, and obviously the work that Tech is doing is instrumental in this. We're very shortly going to be able to do this en masse and exceptionally cheaply and end up with this enormous fire hose of data. What do we do with that now about not just the way that we teach, but about the way people learn? Is going to be very, very instructive. So I would just my thoughts about this are that we should have an honest conversation about what's going on, that be cognizant of what is actually happening and say, how do we adapt and adjust, not to prevent it, but to understand what's going on and do the next thing.
Absolutely. And I think going back to what Kenneth was saying earlier, professional development will be increasingly important with this in context, right? Because I just think about Turnitin, for example. I still see teachers misreading the data that Turnitin will give on the percentage of similarity and so on, right? And we constantly have to train faculty to read the reports properly or how to analyze them in a responsible way. So as we get more data and our teaching environment becomes more complex, professional development becomes increasingly important. I'm going to pass the same question over to Kenneth or Hector, but this time I'd like to add the whole point about skills versus knowledge as well. So we have cognitive offloading and the danger of that, but at the same time, the changing environment, there's an increasing need that students will need to graduate with new set of skills. And AI will be a part of responsible use and effective use of artificial intelligence will be a part of that skill set. So it's a balance between cognitive offloading and learning how to use the tools to problem solve and make decisions. So what are your thoughts? Hector or Kenneth? I'll let either of you step in on that. Hector, yeah.
Okay. Yes. It's a challenging question because we are worried about the misuse of this technology. But if we don't train our students to use them when they go to the market, the job market, they will be in disadvantage if they don't use these tools. So we need to tell them how to use them, how to acknowledge what they are using, but also to recognize that not everything that comes out from these tools is perfect, is well written. They must be aware that these technologies may be producing hallucinations, that the text that is not well referenced, or at least by now doesn't have references that you can trustworthy use. So they must to know the limitations, and I think that that's the main challenge now. If you are well aware of what are the limitations of the technology, then you can use it properly. Otherwise, you will trust whatever it produces, and you will be delivering something that is not useful, or is not well grounded on the. So you must to be aware and be responsible for what you are delivering in the end. Even when you use a technology or not, you must know that you are responsible for the outcome you are delivering. So that responsibility still resides in the person, and you must to be well aware of how to use it. For me, that will be the ultimate training we should give to our students and teachers as well, that they must verify whatever they produce with these tools.
Thanks. Kenneth, I'm going to pass the same question over to you and as a wrap up, and then I probably would like to open it up to the audience as well, because I'd like to get them to be able to express their voice and see if they have any questions. So, Kenneth, if you want to wrap it up and with a follow up to what Hector and Danny said.
Yeah, I think yes, this important to be AI literate, to gain all these skills. I think as an educator, what we will need to do is really to look at our teaching materials and really think about, and also in conversation with our industry partners or our industry research partners, ask them, for example, if I were to teach statistics, if I were to ask some of these institutions, how are they using generative AI tools now, to do their calculations, their analysis. And if I do see that, they are no longer concerned about, the syntax of R, using R, the coding, the programming languages. There's more about, asking ChatGPT straight away to analyze certain chunks of data in order to identify averages or medians. So we have to also, as educators, be informed of how industry are using these tools in their work as well, because then that will give us feedback. What is fundamental, what is still required, what is still not required. Because bear in mind, sometimes we have a higher learning outcomes, but to achieve these higher learning outcomes, you might need more fundamental outcomes. But with this jump in some of this technology, the more intermediate steps might not be relevant anymore. So this is one perspective and questioning that we need to ask, to look at our curriculum, to talk with our industry partners, how things are evolving. And then in order to find out what skills are still fundamental and what skills are actually evolving. Then the other thing we also need to understand is that as institution of higher learning, we're actually part of the long chain of education, starting upstream from kindergarten, even preschool, all the way to where we are, and after that, all the way to adult learning. So from our curriculum perspective, we also need to find out how knowledge is changing at, as the students upstream, we usually call it, before they come to university. So in Singapore, the Ministry of Education actually has conveyed a group of us among all the universities in Singapore. And we also have the opportunity to ask about what kind of AI knowledge are they teaching the younger students in the primary school, the secondary school, and the junior colleges. And it's also interesting to see how they use these tools for their teachers as well, the MOE teachers, we call them. So this connection is also very important, because imagine a student, now with these AI tools, they are very conversant in programming, because no longer have you got to grapple with a lot of syntax, but you just have to understand the concepts, and they're able to use ChatGPT, for example, to generate all the codings, and these codes could get more and more accurate. So in a way, when they enter, let's say the computing course at SUTD, there's really a fundamental knowledge which is now shifted upstream. So there is this thing that we also need to keep aware of basically, where by the time they come to us, what sort of fundamental skills do they have because of all these new technology tools. So I think it's a very tricky balance because you got to manage within your own discipline, but you also have to look, upstream how the students are coming in as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Kenneth. You got me thinking about social media in the sense that if we don't get this right now, we might find ourselves in the same situation as we are with social media. And we got so many things wrong with social media and its impact on society and learning in that sense. I know, for example, Australia, Danny, you would know more than me probably on this one, but I believe Australia is debating about banning social media for children under the age of 16 for various reasons.
Then yeah.
Yeah. And so by that point, it's almost too late. So we want to make sure that we don't get to that point with artificial intelligence and its impact on learning and development, but also prepare readiness for this future. I'd like to open up the now questions to the audience. Of course, I have more questions I could ask the panel, but I think it's important for us to involve the audience if they have any questions. I'll take some questions now. Okay, I see them back. So the question is AI, you'd like us to comment on the point that AI may be decreasing creativity of our students. Would anyone on the panel like to follow up with that? We talk a little bit about critical thinking and offloading, but what's the impact on creativity?
Yeah. I could share, first
Kenneth, I can't hear you, sorry.
So I could share a bit first. Yeah. I think creativity for AI tools, there is a possibility because some of these AI tools, because we have a project right now using large language model as a tutoring aid. So we feed it with our course contents. And right now is, let's say, mathematics. And then we also feed it with physics. So there is this possibility where, because right now, humanly, the lecturers, if you talk to a maths lecturer, they may know something about physics, right? It could be quite connected. But let's say if you start to specialize, then they are very specialized, like, oh, us, we are very specialists in certain research areas. But with these tools, they can actually help to analyze information across various disciplines. So they are able to integrate knowledge, but I wouldn't call that creativity. Yeah. So I think the creativity of humans is still very important because the tool can help you to find commonalities on pieces of information across different disciplines, which is very powerful because if not, you have got to read everything and do some cross analysis. So that is a very powerful thing. But once you have these connections, how do you apply it to solve problems, or how do you come up with new solutions on top of this? I think this is something that humans will still be very, very relevant because it's irreplaceable in my view.
Yeah, I want to step in on that, Kenneth, if you don't mind. I think there's a danger of us being technologically deterministic. What I mean by that is saying that technology is going to be 100% the cause of everything. right? So it's going to kill creativity. I think that's a very simplistic view. It's an easy view to adopt, but it's a very simplistic view. There are a lot of factors that come into play, that's such as the environment, and what I mean by environment, I don't mean just the physical environment, but the nurturing or the guidance and the teacher presence and everything that involves the actions and the tasks to be done, right? This all influences how people interact and create as well, just as much as the tool does. So if we look at it from a pedagogical point of view, we can think of things like design thinking and a design thinking approach to learning. And then in that case, artificial intelligence can be used as a tool in a sense to facilitate creativity and to enhance creativity in order to achieve a task. Right. So if you break down design thinking into its components from the very beginning, where our students have to empathize with their audience or empathize with the subjects that they're dealing with, and that is to identify the problem within a specific context, AI can help them with that. Then they move on to the next step and they can start ideating or brainstorming for ideas to solve that problem. And each stage, from ideation to testing to reflection to revising, AI can help students think through each stage and further develop. And it will be up to the teachers or the course design to ensure that the AI and the students are using it for reflective purposes, right? And I'm seeing chatbots starting to emerge where they're designed not to give answers, but they're designed to purposely give specific examples of questions so that students, through the design thinking process, they're reflecting and they're becoming more metacognitively aware of whether or not they're reaching that final goal. So it comes down to the design of the learning process and the learning environment as well, right? And AI could be a tool that can help students be more creative in that sense. Yeah. And
I
Victor,
could add something in that regard. Probably you remember an exercise, well, a presentation we have in the first Physical Learning Alliance Summit this January, where some professors presented a case where they generated images with a certain topic, and these images were presented to students who were analyzed using EEG to know which kind of images they were more likely to see. It was some marketing exercise. So they were looking at the advertisements the AI prepared, and they use eye trackers for seeing which elements they were more focused. But in the end, they were capable of knowing which was the best poster presented to the audience using technology. But in the end, you need to explain why this was important, which element they were looking at, and they understand why this element is attractive or not. Some of them produce disgust in the audience, but that part is not something the AI could explain. And that's still the difference we have over the AI. We can explain things. We can understand why this is happening, why we like something, we don't dislike something else. So if we force our students to go to that point to explain the reasons, then we could make good use of the AI in
interesting.
any category of any tool we use.
Yeah, thanks, Hector. Really interesting.